In this video, I am going to discuss about demand and supply. Demand, the desire and ability of consumers to buy a specific product or service. Demand is a microeconomic factor. If you can remember, we discussed about aggregate demand and aggregate supply in a previous video. Here we are going to discuss about demand and supply in the microeconomic level, which means in an individual level. The demand for a product or service can be influenced by a variety of factors such as price, income, tastes and preferences, and the availability of substitute products. Before we go into the demand curve, let's discuss about different types of goods. Substitute goods, alternative options that fulfill a similar need or satisfy a similar want. As an example, buses and trains. Imagine you want to travel to point A to point B. There are buses and trains available. You can choose either because there is an alternative to buses or trains. So these can be considered as substitute goods because both them will fulfill the similar need. Complementary goods. These are used together and typically consumed at the same time. When the demand for one good increases, the demand for its complement also increases. Conversely, when the demand for one good decreases, the demand for its complement decreases as well. For an example, cars and fuel. Because the demand for cars increases, the need for fuel will be also increased because cars need fuel. And conversely, when the demand for cars decreases, the demand for fuel will be also decreased and both of the goods will be consumed at the same time. So these kind of goods can be considered as complementary goods. Inferior goods. They have a lower quality or standard compared to other goods or services in the market. For example, generic brands of food items such as rice, pasta, and canned goods. Inferior goods. They have a lower quality or standard compared to other goods or services in the market. For example, generic brands of good items such as rice, pasta, and canned goods. When it comes to inferior goods, income and the demand for the inferior goods have a inverse relationship, which means as the income increases, the demand for inferior goods will decrease. As the income decreases, the demand for inferior goods will increase. Normal goods. Normal goods are goods or services for which demand increases as income increases and decreases as income decreases. For examples, luxury items such as expensive cars and jewelries. Under normal goods, income level and the demand for normal goods have a positive relationship, which means as the income increases, the demand for normal goods will increase. As the income decreases, the demand for normal goods will decrease. Now let's discuss about the relationship between price and demand. The y-axis depicts the price and the x-axis depicts the quantity for demand. And this is the demand curve. Even though this is a straight line, in the reality this will be a curve. So that is why this is called the demand curve. The straight line is the simple illustration so we can understand the relationship between the price and demand. The price and the demand are inversely related, which means if the price increases, the demand will decrease. If the price decreases, the demand will increase. Remember, demand is the ability and the willingness to pay a good or service. Look at the demand curve here. Let's consider P2 price. As the P2 price increases to P3, what will happen to the demand? Let's see. This is the demand level for the P2, which is Q2. Now let's see what is the demand level for P3. The demand level for P3 will be Q1. What has happened? The demand has decreased. So this is the inverse relationship between the price and demand. On the other hand, now let's consider the decrease in price. P2 to P1. What will happen to the demand level? This is P1. Now let's see what will be the quantity of demand. So the quantity of demand for P1 will be Q3, which means now the demand has increased as the price decreased. This is called the expansion or the contraction of the demand. Expansion and contraction. Expansion is where the demand is increasing. Contraction is where demand is decreasing. The expansion and the contraction can be illustrated on the demand curve because the expansion and contraction will move along the demand curve like that. Now let's discuss factors affecting the demand. Price. The price of a product or service is a major determinant of demand. As the price of a product or service increases, demand generally decreases and vice versa. We already talked about this in the previous slide. Income. Income is also a key factor that affects demand. As people's income increases, they tend to buy more goods and services, which increases the demand conversely. Conversely, as income decreases, people tend to buy less, which decreases demand. Tastes and preferences. The tastes and preferences of consumers also play a role in determining demand. If consumers prefer certain types of products or services, the demand for those products or services will increase, and vice versa. Advertising and marketing. Advertising and marketing can also impact demand by creating awareness and interest in a product or service. Expectations. Expectations about future price changes, changes in income, and other economic conditions can also affect demand. If people expect prices to rise in the future, they may buy more now, which increases demand. Competition. Competition in the market also affects demand. If there are many substitutes available, demand may be more sensitive to price changes. Availability of substitute goods. The availability of substitute goods can also impact demand. If there are many substitute goods available, the demand for a product is likely to be more sensitive to changes in price. Seasonality. The demand for certain products or services can also be affected by seasonality. For example, the demand for winter clothing and products such as snow shovels increases during the winter months, while the demand for air conditioning and fans increases during the summer months. Demographics. Demographic factors such as age, gender, education, and cultural background can also affect demand. For example, products aimed at children or older people may have a different demand profile than products aimed at young adults. Demographic factors such as age, gender, education, and cultural background can also affect demand. For example, products aimed at children or older people may have a different demand profile than products aimed at young adults. Now let's talk about the demand curve shifting to left and right side. This can be due to many reasons. The demand curve can be moved to left side or right side like this. This is the movement of to the left side and this is the movement to the right side. Now what will happen at the same price level? Now there are different levels of demand here, here and here. The demand levels are changing but the price level stays the same. Now let's discuss about supply. Supply is the quantity of a product or service that a producer is willing and able to offer for sale at a given price. This is a microeconomic factor. In general, as the price of a good or service increases, the quantity of that good or service that is supplied will also increase. Conversely, if the price decreases, the quantity supplied will decrease. Now let's discuss about the price versus supply relationship. Price and the supply are positively related, which means if the price increases, the supply will increase. If the price decreases, the supply will also decrease. The y-axis depicts the price, whereas the x-axis depicts the quantity for the supply. Look at the given supply curve here. Let's consider the price P2. If the price increases to P3, what will happen to the supply? Let's see. The P3 here, so the quantity of the supply will be Q3 here. So what has happened? The supply increases to Q3 because the price and the supply are positively related. Now let's see what will happen if the price drops to P1. So the supply will be Q1. What has happened? The supply also decreased to Q1 because the price and the supply are positively correlated. These changes are called the expansion and also the contraction. This is also called the extension, which means if the quantity of supply increasing, it is called the expansion, like this. If the quantity of supply decreasing, it is called the contraction, like this. This is the moving along the supply curve. Now let's discuss factors affecting the supply. Production costs. If the cost of producing a product increases, the supply of that product will likely to decrease as it will become more expensive for producers to make. Technology. Advances in technology can increase the efficiency of production, leading to an increase in supply. Natural resources. The availability of raw materials can impact the supply of a product. If the cost of acquiring a key input increases, it may reduce the supply of the final product. Number of suppliers. If there are many suppliers of a good or service, the overall supply of that product will be higher compared to a situation where there are fewer suppliers. Government policies. Government policies such as taxes and subsidies can influence the supply of a product. For example, a subsidy for a particular industry may increase the supply of that industry's products. Expectations. Producers' expectations about future market conditions can also affect supply. For example, if producers expect that the price of a product will increase in the future, they may increase production to take advantage of the higher prices. Disasters. Natural disasters such as hurricanes or earthquakes can disrupt the supply of goods and services by damaging production facilities or disrupting transportation networks. Now let's discuss about the shifting supply curve to the right and left hand side. This is the supply curve shifting to left side, whereas this is the supply curve shifting to right side. As you can see now, for a same price level, there are now three quantities here, here and here. This is called the rise or fall of the supply because at the same price level, there are now three supply levels. As the supply curve moves to the right side, it is an increase in supply. When the supply curve moves to the left side, it is a fall of supply. Now let's discuss about the equilibrium price. The equilibrium price is the price where the forces of supply and demand are in balance and there is no pressure for the price to rise or fall. At this price, consumers are willing to pay the price being offered by producers, and producers are willing to sell the quantity that consumers want to buy. The market will remain at this price until some factor changes, causing either supply or demand for the product to increase or decrease, leading to a new equilibrium price. This is how we can identify the equilibrium price using the demand and supply curve. The point at which the supply and demand curve intersect is the equilibrium price. For this example, P2 is the equilibrium price, the Q2 is the equilibrium quantity, which means supply and the demand are equal at this point. The area under these two lines represents the excess demand because the demand is higher than the supply. The area above these two lines represents the excess supply because now the supply is higher than the demand. The excess supply will happen due to minimum price, which means if the government imposes a minimum price for a product or service, the supply will excess the demand because the price is guaranteed. So the producers will supply more than the demand. In this situation, the resources will be inefficiently used. Excess demand will happen due to maximum price. This is where government will impose a maximum price for a good or service. The supply of a good or service will be lower than the demand. Both the maximum and minimum pricing will affect the economy negatively. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.